Hi, it's time for another verb of the day. Today's verb is voice. And this verb was suggested by the viewer Luis. So thanks so much for that suggestion. I welcome others as well. So please leave comments if you have ideas you'd like to share. But now let's take a look at the different ways that we can use the verb voice. The first way you might encounter this verb being used means to express something in words. So you might think of talking and speaking here. A second way you hear voice used can mean to utter speech, sound with resonance of the vocal cords. So what that means is you can feel a vibration in your vocal cords. If you've taken a pronunciation course, maybe you've done this with another teacher, so there are certain sounds in English where our vocal cords vibrate. A good example, maybe if we start with D sounds, a D. Put your hand, if you can, with me right here, and let's just make duh, duh. You can feel a little movement there, okay? But if we make a T sound, again, put your hand here on your vocal cords and say t, t. There's no movement. So that's what that second definition is talking about. A third way to use the verb voice means to adjust for producing the proper musical sounds, right? So kind of thinking about the different sounds that are coming out. A fourth way you might hear voice used can mean to provide voice over. Could be for a movie, a commercial, or something else. So you might think of animated movies. I'm going to have examples of that a little bit later, right? We don't see actors portraying characters, but we hear voices we know. And that's what that fourth definition means. For now, you should know that voice is a regular verb. To make our progressive form of the verb, you're going to drop the E on the end because we have a vowel consonant E pattern. And we drop that E before we add ing. That makes voicing. The past tense and participle forms of this verb can be made by just adding D, since this verb already ends in an E. Now our base verb, voice, ends with an S sound, and an S sound is one of those unvoiced, okay? Because it is unvoiced, the ED here is going to make a T sound, and I'm not going to add an extra syllable as I say it. So it should sound like this: voiced, voiced, okay? Now, there aren't any phrasal verbs that we need to study, so instead, we can do a little verb tense practice. Today, I thought we would review the simple present and the simple future with a focus on be going to. Let's start with the simple present. We use this verb tense to talk about our habits and our routines. These are actions that repeat with sort of a known frequency, right? It might be something you do every day, could be something you do once a year or once a month, etc., right? So the thing we have to remember about making verbs in our simple present is that we must pay attention to our subject. If our subject is I, you, we, or they, you just use the base verb, okay? No special endings. Okay? But if your subject is he, she, or it, we need to add an S to the end of that verb. So you can see that in my example here. He voices his opinions very regularly. Right? This is going to go back to that first definition. Maybe this is someone at work who shares, like, I think this is a good idea, or I think this is a better way to do something, but it's someone who's going to use their words and not be kind of quiet or not keep those thoughts to himself. If you want to make a negative simple present sentence, we have a slightly different pattern to follow. Again, we pay attention to our subject. If our subject is I, you, we, or they, we're going to use do not and then the base verb. If our subject is he, she, or it, we use does not and then the base verb. So notice no S on the end of the verb here in the negative. Let's take a look at another example. He doesn't voice any characters in this animated movie. Okay, so that's that last definition. Maybe we're talking about a particular actor. I know sometimes when I watch or hear things, I think, do I know that voice? Right? Here, not, we're saying this particular actor does not. Okay. Lastly, if you want to make a yes or no question in the simple present, start with do or does. Whichever form matches your subject, that subject comes next, then the base verb. Again, no S on the end of a verb in our yes or no question. We're only doing that in the affirmative when our subject is he, she, or it. Let's take a look at the last example. Do you voice your concerns when asked? Okay, so here we might be asking about your habit or your routine at work, at your place of work. Okay. Now let's move on and talk a little bit about making sentences in the simple future. Today, we're going to focus on making sentences with be going to. And be going to is most commonly used as people discuss their plans for their future. You might hear some people use it for other future-related things like predictions or promises, but really the focus is on plans. And this is another verb tense where we need to pay attention to our subject, and that's because our subject is going to affect or control the form of be that we use. So we'll be using present forms of be, which means if our subject is I, I'm going to use am, going to, and then the base verb. But if my subject is you, we, or they, I use are, A-R-E, going to, and then the base verb. Finally, if my subject is he, she, or it, I use is, going to, and then our base verb. Let's take a look at an affirmative example. Communities are going to voice some of their opinions with regard to how the ruling party is doing. Okay. Saw a sentence very similar to this that was talking about some upcoming elections in Europe and in other countries. Right? Kind of saying people, right, are going to indicate, right, what they think of current elected officials based on how they vote in the present elections. Now let's look at negative simple future sentences with be going to. Again, we always pay attention to our subject, okay? And then we're going to use either am, are, or is, then not, then going to, and our base verb. Now, sometimes people will combine are not into the contraction aren't, or is not into the contraction isn't. Okay, we do not have a contraction for am not, so that's always going to stay two separate words. Let's take a look at another example here. He isn't going to voice his gripes about the schedule for fear the manager may take it out on him. So gripes is another way to say complaints, right? So here, maybe someone is upset with how he has been scheduled, maybe how frequently or which shifts, but he's afraid to speak up and in fear that he could be treated even worse. Finally, let's look at making a yes or no question in the simple future. To do this, we're going to start with our form of be, whichever form matches that subject, which comes next, then going to, and our base verb. Here's the final question. Is a famous actor going to voice Batman in the animated series? Right? So I think there are rumblings of another installment or series, right? So here someone wants to know those plans connected to maybe an actor playing the part or providing the voice of that character. Now let's spend a couple minutes looking at some words and phrases that are related to our verb voice. And the first word we're going to discuss is just the noun form of this word. The noun voice has the exact same spelling and the exact same pronunciation as our verb. And this noun can have a number of different meanings. We're going to talk about 5 different ways to use this noun. The first way is really to talk about the sound that gets produced by most people. So using different parts of our body here, the larynx, and it's uttered through the mouth. It can come out as speech or it can come out as a song. An example of how you might hear this noun used in a sentence could be, your voice sounds different. Are you feeling okay? So sometimes as people catch colds or other illnesses, their voice might sound a little bit different, right? The sound that's coming from their mouth. Now, a second way you might hear the noun voice used might really just refer to that ability to speak or the ability to sing. So, an example of this, the illness caused her to lose her voice. Right? Sometimes that can last for a day or a few days, maybe a week. But that's what we're talking. It doesn't presently have the ability to speak. A third way to use the noun voice is to talk about a particular opinion or some attitude that another person is expressing. So, an example of this, dissenting voices gathered in protest. So, dissenting would be people who do not agree. So, all of these people who share that same opinion or the same idea have come together to protest something. A fourth way to use our noun voice is to talk about the range or the pitch. You might also think a type of tone in which someone can sing, right? So we're talking about kind of how low or how high someone's voice is. So an example of this, the choir's soprano voices are fantastic. So again, focusing on a particular range or of pitches and tones that someone can sing. Our last way to use the noun voice is to talk about a form or set of forms of a verb showing the relation of the subject to the action. So now this is a very specific definition. It's connected to grammar. And sometimes we talk about this in my videos. We talk about active voice, passive voice. Many languages have those two different ways of structuring sentences. So an example of this, in other videos, I contrast the active voice and the passive voice. So again, it affects the order of words in a sentence in English or any other language. Okay. Now let's spend a moment with a couple phrases. You might hear someone use the phrase give voice to or give a voice to. And really what it means when someone uses that is they are allowing either an emotion or an opinion to be expressed. An example of this. The book examines how the newspaper gave a voice to immigrants. Here we're talking about maybe I think I saw a sentence similar to this, kind of going back historically, looking at a particular group of immigrants who started their own newspaper, and they were able, through that publication, to share their ideas, their opinions about things that were going on in the community and to inform people about things they felt were very important. So that newspaper was what allowed them to express that opinion. One last phrase for today, and that's with one voice. When someone uses that phrase, they're talking about a group of people being in complete agreement. An example of this might be, the court has spoken with one voice on the matter. So sometimes you have a group of judges making a decision, and maybe 3 feel this way, 2 feel that way, or some other combination. Here it would be all of them together share the exact same thoughts, have come to the same conclusion on a particular matter. Thanks again to Luis for suggesting today's verb. I appreciate you all watching, and I hope you have a great day.